Good evening. We will wait a few minutes in case more folks are logging in. I'm going to get started. Uvlu Lotap, Uvanga Kazaglana. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Barb Amarok, and I work with the University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus team in Nome. I use her, she pronouns. I'm very excited and honored to be a part of this series and to be assisting as the facilitator tonight. I want to start by acknowledging that those at our Troth Yetta campus in Fairbanks are on the unceded customary lands of the Dene people of the Tanana River. In the Bering Strait region, the Northwest Campus is located on the customary lands of the Inupiaq, Siberian Yupik, and Yupik peoples. We honor the continued fight for the rights of the First Peoples. At U Fairbanks, we are growing our institution into a socially just and caring institution of higher education. This ongoing speaker series titled Shine a Light, Promoting Conversations on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is designed to inform authentically, build understanding, and engage people in thinking critically about worldviews. This series is led by Northwest Campus, but like all great diversity efforts, is based on partnership and collaboration. We would like to thank the U Fairbanks Department of Equity and Compliance and the U Fairbanks Nanook Diversity and Action Center for partnering with Northwest Campus to bring this series to reality. We've already hosted several topics, including context for Alaska Native equity, Black history in Alaska, and women's history in Alaska. You can find recordings on our website at nwc.uaf.edu. Tonight, we are very excited and very honored to have Anna Hoffman presenting. Anastasia Cook Hoffman was born and raised in Bethel and is a fluent Yupik speaker. She holds a BA degree from Stanford and an MA degree from U Fairbanks. Anna is married to Stosh Hoffman, and they've raised 2 sons and a nephew. Anna values the unique work and subsistence life balance rural Alaska provides, and she is active in the Orthodox Church Choir, and she volunteers in the community. Anna is a shareholder of the Village Bethel Native Corporation and the regional Chalista Corporation, having inherited shares from her late mother, Margaret Nick Cook. Anna is also a member of the tribal governing body of Bethel. Anna has been elected to serve as one of 2 co-chairs of the Alaska Federation of Natives since 2013. She lives in Bethel and has worked as the president CEO of the Bethel Native Corporation since 2006. We hope you join us each month as we present and discuss various topics. Tonight's event will be more of a discussion, so we encourage you to raise your hand by using the hand icon. When you do, we will unmute your mic. You are also welcome to ask questions in the chat box. Please welcome Anna Hoffman.
Koyana Barb for that introduction. Koyana Wafata Ilagot Kakala. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this forum. What a great series that you've put together. And I know that you've had some speakers from the UAF campus as well. So I appreciate you reaching out to me here in Bethel. Just to share a little bit about myself, to add to what Barb shared. I am the daughter of Margaret Nick Cook and Chris Cook, and I had an older sister and a younger brother. And my mom, we grew up with a lot of her family surrounding us. There was 9 brothers and sisters in her family, and they're originally from the village of Nunapitchuk. And so we grew up with a lot of family here. And when we were young toddlers, Bethel was a regional high school, and my parents hosted students from Nunap that were going to school here at the high school. And that helped to solidify Yupik as the primary language in the home. So I grew up with Yupik as my first language, my sister and I both, and my brother had some proficiency as well. A story about that, when I was in kindergarten, the teacher who continues to teach to this day, she's been teaching for about 40 years now, and she taught kindergarten to both of my children. And when I was in kindergarten, we had to pick the item on the paper that started with the letter K. And there was a kite and a saw and a bike. And I circled the saw. And I remember this vividly. It's one of my first memories. She brought me up to her desk and she said, "Why did you circle the saw?" And I said, "Because it starts with K." And she said, "How?" And I said, "It's a klak." And she put a big star on that. And she actually shares that story as well. And I think about it, if she had not been a Yupik speaker, I could have been tracked into a different learning group. And rather than being celebrated, it would have been a concern. And so it's just a story to help us see that having Native language and the cultural presence in the school is so significant to ensuring that the success of Native students and rural students. So my children were, as I said, taught by her as well. We had started the Yupik immersion program in Bethel back in, I believe the first class of it was in 1997, if I'm right there. But my cousin, Christopher Liu, Galak Liu, he was one of the first graduates from the Yupik immersion program. And recently, he and another student from Guinachak were featured in the local news here in Bethel as they're developing a Yupik spell check app. And so that is going to be launched soon. And it's incredible to see the integration of language and science and technology through and he might not feel as comfortable with his fluency around other very fluent people, but having the proficiency that he gained from Yupik immersion and from just exposing himself with his family has brought the accessibility of Yupik to so many people by developing that app. He also has an app called the Yuchtun app, and there's Yuchtun LKSD. So if you guys have your phones, you can look up those apps. There's a game that you can play, and it was quite timely that he was developing this right before COVID happened and everything went remote. People have tools that they can bring into their home to help their language acquisition. So I wanted to share that story of Galak as well. So proud of his accomplishment. But you invited me here to talk about my involvement with AFN, and as stated, I would welcome any questions or discussion from others that are participating here as well. I inherited shares in 1996 after my mother passed, and growing up, my sister was an original shareholder, but I was born after 71. And I always knew that I had a place in the corporation, but it would be later. And I believe in, in our region, we haven't had the luxury of big corporate checks over the years. So it was, I didn't think I was, I knew that my participation would come later, and I wasn't missing out, I guess, or I didn't, it wasn't a competitive thing. It was a patience thing. And once I did become a shareholder and inherited my mom's shares, I ran for the board with Bethel Native Corporation. And I was elected to the board in 2000. So it was early after receiving shares that I became involved in the board. And then in 2005, the CEO let the board know that they were going to be looking for a replacement, or that he was going to be retiring. And the board made a conscious effort to look for a shareholder to hire and train under the CEO. And so we worked as a board to develop the job description of who the board wanted and how we wanted to go about hiring the position. And I was approached by two elders on the board once we got done with this exercise. And at that time, I was working as a magistrate with the Alaska court system. And the board members came to me and they said, "We'd like this person to be you." And I was humbled by that. I had not considered working for our village corporation as a path that I had seen for myself. So I was surprised and appreciative of their confidence, because it was not, like I said, it was not something I had pursued. But by them approaching me, it felt like a very native way to be invited to apply for that position. So through that method, I did apply for the position, and I trained under the CEO for a year. I was hired as a COO in 2005, resigned off the board, because in our corporation, you cannot be on the board and work for the corporation. So I resigned and worked for a year training under him. And he actually accelerated the position title. So I was supposed to be the CEO in June of 2006 when he left. And he said, in January, let's make the change, and he'll be the COO and I'll be the CEO. And again, it was, he himself was very supportive and very humble, and wasn't concerned about what title he had in the end. He was more concerned about this transition being successful and smooth. So there was some real support there for me in that role. So I took over in January of '06 as the CEO, and I've been in that role since then. The night that he left Bethel, though, I had a little bit of a panic attack. And I wondered what in the world I had gotten myself into. And, and so the first thing I did was I rearranged the office. So I made it my space, and I was overwhelmed. And I was 32 years old and was responsible for this company. And then I thought it was overwhelming to think about in its totality, but I thought, let me just get through this week. I'll get through the first week, and then let me get through the second week, and then let me get through the month. And by taking that approach of having smaller, closer goals, I was able to calm myself down. And here I've been in this position now for 16 years, and it's been we've grown the company significantly. And then in 2010, I became involved with AFN, and I was selected as the village rep to the AFN board. And again, I was approached by an elder on the AFN board and asked if I would consider running for co-chair. So it's nice that our traditional ways of identifying and encouraging leadership happens even in these very foreign structures. And so it's good for us to recognize how we've indigenized these systems. And the more we are able to have that impact, the more meaningful the systems will be for us. And through throughout the time that I've been involved with AFN as co-chair since 2013, one of the things that I really felt strongly about was getting more people of different generations involved in AFN. And I think we are really seeing that. It's a board of 38 members. And in the last 8 years, we have been seeing involvement and representation from the various regions begin to change and begin to incorporate younger generations, which is nice to see that continuity happen. And so I'm really happy for that. Another thing that was important for me with my involvement at AFN was to get the organization to have a greater presence in rural Alaska. Even just, I know that there's a lot of advocacy by AFN for rural Alaska, but also just getting the meetings to happen outside of our city centers. So during my tenure, I'm glad to say we've met in Kodiak and in Kotzebue, here in Bethel, down in Juneau. So those were, and in Fairbanks a couple of times. I know Fairbanks, we don't think of as, as being an outreach, but AFN's meetings were always happening in Anchorage. So we did have board meetings in Fairbanks, and that inclusion of Fairbanks predated me. AFN started having conferences in Fairbanks, as we all know, over the last 20 years, that there's been some rotation into Fairbanks. I know that's sometimes tough for the arts and crafts people, especially because they rely heavily on those sales. So that is an impact, but it is important to bring AFN around the state and not just centralize it in the urban areas. So with that, I hope that gives a general introduction, and I'm happy to respond to any questions or hear other people contribute to the conversation.
Thank you, Anna. This is Barb again. I just want to say thank you. The Alaska Federation of Natives has a presence in Alaska. I think most Alaskans know about the organization and might have a, even if minor idea about the activities. And I just want to say that we are out here in rural Alaska, and we greatly appreciate the work that comes out of the staff. And as you mentioned to me earlier, which is guided by the resolutions that come to the floor every year at the convention. And I think we've all seen the positive effects of the work of AFN in the political system, in the educational system, and relating to federal and state subsistence regulation and guidelines. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes, it's important work, and AFN has, for a small, I don't think people realize how small their staff is. There's just a handful of them that work full-time at AFN, and it's the amount of work that they contribute to establishing policy at state and federal level. It really is incredible. So we have good advocates there.
So Anna, Anupama Prakash is a provost at the University of Fairbanks, and she has a question. What are the strategies you use to motivate and engage our Alaska Native youth in AFN? And also, what advantages do they see in this engagement?
Thank you for the question, and I'm looking at it here. I'll talk about my AFN youth participation. When I was in high school here in Bethel, we had a class that brought students to the AFN Youth Convention. And that was my first introduction to AFN. My mom had been, I always knew about AFN because of my mom's involvement herself. She was the first secretary of AFN, and she was a strong advocate for Native rights. She went to DC and testified for the passage of ANCSA. She had dropped out of high school as a freshman and went home. And so she, without a formal education, she went and did this advocacy. And she would make trips with Willie Hensley and Byron Malott down to DC. She tells me a story that one time coming back from DC, she had never been to New York, so she wanted to check it out. And so she took a side trip to New York and landed there with no money. And she had her fur parka. And she said she took a taxi and promised the cab driver she would send a check when she got home. And he brought her, and same with the hotel, and they let her stay for a night. And I think about the courage that she had to have to make that trip. And she said she came home and she wrote those checks and mailed them out to pay for her trip to New York. It was such a neat thing to know. So I had known that she was involved with AFN and helped with the passage. And the thing about her was she did that advocacy for a lifestyle that once the advocacy was done and she felt that her contribution was made, she came home and lived the lifestyle that she had worked to protect. So I always think about that example, is that there are a lot of people like her I'm sure in your region there in Nome, that did that advocacy work in the 60s and 70s, and then stepped back and were the culture bearers at home, kept the language alive and their subsistence activities going, and taught their children how to eat and hunt off the land and fish. And so there's that contribution of those people that I think doesn't get much recognition, but really was impactful. So when I went to the AFN Youth Conference, it was so powerful to see hundreds of Alaska Native youth gathered together in this room, and just the pride of their of who they were, where they came from, and the knowing that they were going to be contributors to their tribes, their corporations, their regions. I was AFN youth delegate the same time Tara McLean was a youth delegate from Barrow area, and she was the assistant secretary of the Department of the Interior. So it really was something to see all of these Alaska Native youth get together and see the strength in numbers and strength in their culture that you knew was just gonna multiply. And so I think to answer your question, just getting the kids exposed to their place in the state, I think is real important. They'll take it from there.
Thank you, Anna. This is Barb again. We hear what you're saying about advocacy, and the general community in Alaska starts to see that in action. And I see it at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where we have young people in Fairbanks, and actually our student population out in the rural areas is a little different demographic, but they have something in common in that a lot of times we hear students saying that the reason why they're taking courses, the reason why they're working towards degrees, and is because they want to serve their communities in the most effective way that they can. That's what we do in Alaska. We go for schooling, we plan, we think about how we serve our communities. That's always the first thing that we think about. So thank you. And Bob Metcalf, I think you know Bob Metcalf and Vera Metcalf. Bob has a comment and question. He says, "Hello, Anna. Thank you for taking your time to talk with us. I'm wondering what you and AFN see as upcoming issues for rural Alaska communities."
Thank you, Bob. And nice to have all of you participating tonight. For rural Alaska communities, what has really been pronounced this year is the broadband connectivity. And I was worried, even with this Zoom, if that was going to be an issue tonight. Thankfully, so far it hasn't been. But I know that making the accommodations that had to be made for the COVID response really showed the disparity that we have in rural Alaska. And so broadband connectivity is a big one. For this area, I know that the ABCP region has concerns about public safety, and that continues to be an area that needs resolution. Another important thing, and I think one that we're making progress on with AFN's help, is tribal participation in the ICWA compacting with the state of Alaska. And my uncle works for OCS, and he says that over the last couple of years, the recognition of relative placement and native placement of children in care really has changed for the better. There is a respect and a deference now given to kids in foster care, where he said people that had never inquired as to whether there was relative placement available, check that first now. And so it is a direct result of AFN's advocacy and the partnership that AFN had with tribes. And I'm glad to see, I was concerned that because it was signed under the Walker administration, I'm glad to see that from his interface with the agencies on a day in, day out basis, that has continued to be consistent, that there is attention being paid to Alaska Native placement with Native families. So I'm really pleased about that. So those are things that I think are important areas that need continued improvement, and also just building on our success.
Thank you, Anna. Nettie LaBelle Hamer shares, thank you for sharing your interesting story with us. I love how you described how you got through your first few weeks. Very inspiring and excellent advice for anyone stepping up in their career. Can you talk a little more about how you and AFN are mentoring young Alaskans?
So I'll talk about a personal, I can share another personal story on that front. And this is actually carrying on. I can't claim to have been the owner of this idea. So when growing up, my mom made us join a Yupik dance group here, and we actually practiced at the Kuskokwim campus here in Bethel. And when your parents make you do something, you know how that goes. So my sister and I were, we had to go to this event, but of course we enjoyed it. It was fun. And my kids did Yurak with school because they were Yupik immersion students, and it was part of the curriculum. But I also thought it was important for them to do it outside of school. And so I had my boys join a local troupe, and they participated as young kids. And then my younger son, both of them were very involved with wrestling here in Bethel. We have a great wrestling program. It's a local person, Darren Lieb. He's done an incredible job. He reaches out to kids that many other coaches wouldn't reach out to. And he builds up their confidence and incorporates them into the wrestling team. And I loved that example that he has set and continues to contribute to the community. And anyways, with my younger son in the wrestling program, there were about 8 boys that had all gone to Yupik immersion, and they were in high school now because it only lasts till 6th grade. And they were all classmates. And I said, well, why don't you boys start a Yupik dance group? And to my surprise, they were all very interested, and we started it in our living room. And his senior year, they put this group together. They didn't know that the result was going to be that they performed at the Chamai Dance Festival, and then they were invited to perform in Texas. And for a couple of the boys on that team, they had never been out of the state of Alaska before. And so what we just started as a get together with these boys, and in our living room, all I had to do was get a drum, and that's all the overhead that there was. And so that group helped these boys make their connection, rejuvenate their connection with dancing. And also several of them, actually a couple of them had not gone to Yupik immersion, but they were wrestlers and they wanted to be a part of the group. And so they were invited to participate. And one of the boys, when they were getting ready to perform at Jamai, said, "It's been my dream to perform at Jamai." And I did not know that that was his dream, but I was so happy that we could help him accomplish his dream. So to answer the question about involvement with AFN of youth, to me, it's not involvement with AFN. AFN is one tool, but there are so many things we can do on a community basis. And you don't know the outreach and the impact that you're gonna have. But simply provide those points of entrance for the young people, and the reward will be there. And like I said, we might not know what that reward is, but helping that boy fulfill his dream of performing at Jamai was incredibly rewarding. And so I would encourage us to not have one audience in mind. Let's just focus on being there to support kids in their everyday goals, because we might be impacting them more than you know. You know, one story that I think about a lot is Hillbilly Elegy. I listened to that audiobook a couple years ago, and it's a movie now. I saw it. The book is better. But I listened to that book, and it's about this family in rural Ohio or rural Kentucky, and the dysfunction that this young man grew up with. But he went on to go to Yale, I believe, and became an attorney later. And then an author, because he wrote the book. But in Hillbilly Elegy, I was reading that book when there was a group of Rasmussen folks that came out to Bethel, and they went to Nabaskat. And then I joined them for an event at the Cultural Center. And I was there, and there was this couple that was really distraught about the feeling of helplessness that she had with the suicide rate out in our region. And she said to me, she said, what can you do? It's so overwhelming. What can you do? And my response to her was, I stay. So, and that's the thing I took out of this book, Hillbilly Elegy, is that you have to have families that stay in rural Alaska. And we have to be here to be that home where that kid can come and dance, even if it's for a couple hours a week, and that's it. We expose them to something else, not just whatever despair they may be dealing with. They can see that that's not their predetermined destiny. There can be another destiny, and they just have to see that it's out there, and then they can reach for it. So I think staying in rural Alaska is so important and contributing. And it doesn't have to be on this grand scale. It can be what we, some people might see as minimal, but it's impactful.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to add, in response to what Nettie asked, that AFN has a big effect around the state. I think it's partly partly because of AFN that things have happened, like regional corporations, village corporations have established internships for young people in high school, young people just out of high school, young people who just graduated from university. And other things are happening too. Here in Nome, we just had a young descendant of a shareholder who graduated from university, was a basketball star in high school and at his university. He came back and with a couple of his teammates from Nome put on a basketball camp for young people, and they pulled in Kiminak, Maddie Elvana Stimfel, who taught them a little bit of conversational Inupiaq, King Island, Ukivak dialect. And young people, they're very attentive. Sometimes I don't see it, but then all of a sudden, they come back and they've done something because they've been affected by something they heard, or the fact that they've been to AFN or AFN Elders and Youth, and they see, oh, somebody that looks like me or somebody from my region is up on that stage giving an inspiring message of hope. And I can do that too. So there's so much, there's so many different ways to give to young people, and it just happens. Let's see. Joe Narvaez says, thank you so much for sharing our experiences. As a follow-up to the question regarding challenges for rural Alaskan communities, do you see an opportunity for our institution? And Joe works for the University of Alaska Fairbanks Nanook Diversity and Action Center, so I assume he's talking about U Fairbanks. Do you see an opportunity for our institution to support our rural communities? How can we support?
I would say making the space available. Going back to that dance group, and when I was in it as a child, we practiced at the college. And so for those communities that have rural campuses like the Northwest Campus, simply making the space available to groups, I think the group will come. I would start there, and the community will develop. And I think what's really neat is when you open up that space, you'll find people coming out of the community with hidden talents that you didn't even know were there. So I would start there, just make the rooms available. The other thing that I heard about today, and I wanted to mention at this talk tonight, is the Inupiaq Spelling Bee that was just recently conducted, and a girl or I think it was a child from Brevik Mission won that Inupiaq Spelling Bee. So congratulations to that youngster. And what I thought was so cool, and we have a Yupik Spelling Bee too. And what I thought was really neat is that in the description, in the story, they said that the participants aren't eliminated in the traditional spelling bee way. So if you misspell a word, you're out. Instead, with the spelling bee that they conducted, it was the person who had the most correctly spelled words that won. And I thought that was the coolest approach I had heard. And it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, is that you bring in this, the cultural mindset, and you'll bring in, there's better ways of being that can come of it.
Yes, wonderful. I was thinking of Titok, Josie Verdon, and Anangalutak, Annie Conger, and Kiminak, and all the others who have supported the Inupiaq Spelling Bee here at our district. Bob Metcalf had a comment. Thank you for those. Thank you for those. We definitely agree that affordable broadband access is critical for our communities. Even just reliable phone access is lacking and expensive. And Nettie shared, thank you, such an important message, connecting to culture, fulfilling dreams. Christy, inspirational message and reminder to support kids in what they want to do. The reward will come later. Thank you.
Yes.
And then here's another question. What path do you suggest young people take if they want to become active in supporting Alaska Native rights issues and priorities?
Well, I studied psychology as an undergrad. So I had thought that I wanted to be a high school counselor, career counselor or a social worker. And then I came home and I got married, and I actually had I had been a Miss Wheel gal, and I had a scholarship from UAF that I didn't use as an undergrad since I went to Stanford. And so I called UAF and I said, I have this scholarship letter. Can I use it to get a master's degree? And they said, sure. And then I got a catalog and there was a rural development degree, a master's program. First time they were offering that. And so I signed up for that. And it wasn't that I had planned on rural development. It was because it was being offered and the times worked. So I took that, and from 2000 to 2002, I did the courses over the phone and got my master's degree. That was a really great program. And I think the undergrad program is really helpful. So I don't think there is one degree that is better than another. I think Alaska Native organizations will benefit from Alaska Native youth that have degrees in economics, in political science, in biology, and I mean, look at the Yupik engineers I was talking about earlier, developing the Yupik app. They were computer science majors, and who knew that that they were going to go on to develop this technology to make Yupik accessible on your iPhone. So I would say just nurture whatever interest you have. And by being involved in your community and your culture, your place in it will come.
Yeah, Anna, I heard, as a matter of fact, I heard on the radio on KNOM News a couple times today on the hour, they had interviewed that one young man with the app, with the Yupik app, and it was interesting. And I think another way that the indigenous way of thinking is about readiness and what you start to feel that your strengths are and how you can support the community being who you are. And it's kind of like a growing into. Oscar Coagli Ngayukak used to say, becoming who you are. And there's more of a recognition of you, every person, even the little ones, as somebody special with having a place in the family, a place in the community and further out, and growing that person to be the best that he or she was born as. I think there's that part of it also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here's another, well, no, I won't ask you that. There was another question, what are AFN's current priorities? But we covered that. So I'll ask if anybody wants to raise their hand or put another question or comment in the chat box.
And if not, we're probably getting close to our time here too. So no pressure to have to come up with something.
Right. And Bob Metcalf must have heard the KNOM today too, because he writes, yes, exclamation mark, a great story on KNOM today. And it is amazing. I mean, people my age, we don't have these comfort. We don't have this comfort with technology that the ones than us do. And it's just incredible the way they're addressing concerns like language, renormalization, language maintenance. They're addressing concerns in the way that their generation is most comfortable with. And that's wonderful. That's amazing. I mean, we survive because we adapt, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's very impressive. And it's, I appreciate that they didn't see technology as something to be intimidated by, but rather to embrace. And when Christopher, so Christopher is my aunt's son, in the Yupik way, if my mother's sister's children are my brothers and sisters, but if my mother's brother's children are my first cousins. So Christopher is, in a Yupik way, would be my brother. And when he called and told me how he was approaching Yupik in this very systematic and mathematic and scientific way, and he explained it to me, and I said, that makes perfect sense. I said, Yupik is going to be the easiest language to learn once you boys spell this out for everyone. Because, like Inupiaq, the language seems intimidating and challenging. Just the deep guttural sounds and things, and the very long words that can come out. But when they applied their scientific minds to it, it actually became very simple and very, he said it was very mathematical, and the coding was very easy for the apps that he put together. So I'm hopeful that it, rather than being something that's detracting, it'll be reinforcing to our native languages.
I agree. I started taking Inupiaq language courses as an adult, and the structure is much more logical and doesn't have anywhere near as many exceptions as English does. English has an exception with every other rule. So that makes sense to me. So, well, I don't see any more comments or questions, although there, another Anupama sends another thank you so much once again. And so I'll just say thank you for joining us this evening. Oh, Nitty LaBelle Hamer says, I think we can all agree that English is one of the worst languages to learn. Yeah, yeah. What is that? There's, oh, never mind. I was just thinking of some of the rules I learned about English in fourth grade. So thank you again for joining us this evening. Please keep an eye out for upcoming topics through our Shine a Light speaker series at nwc.uaf.edu or facebook.com/uaf.nwc. If you'd like to share the recording or give feedback, you can do that by visiting the courses tab at nwc.uaf.edu. Thank you and have a good evening. Bob says, Igamsi Anna. Nettie says, that was a wonderful way to spend an evening. Thank you. And I say, Kuyana Anna.
Ang is the formal way to say you're welcome. Ang.
I'll say E and Bob will say Ah. Dobra.
Oyana. Good evening, everybody.